Okay, hello everybody. I just wanted to talk real quick about adding in, I guess the best way to say it is to add into your readings, a suggestion to add into your readings a place for seeing patterns or how the patterns are going to play out. So hold with me for a second as I try to build where sort of this is coming from. So if you, and why not, make a video like this, but don't be fully prepared. But if you think about casting, so I'm just gonna, whether that's charm casting, whether that's rune casting, whether that's oghams like we have right here, right? So if we're just gonna randomly cast something, one of the benefits of casting is that you really do get a lovely picture, so to speak, of sort of where things are tangled up, where things are coming into being because they're face up, where they're not because they're face down, where they may clump together. And if you use, say, from this being the past moving to the future, you can get a trajectory casting, and you can really get an overarching picture of the movement and the pattern that's playing out in a particular reading, right? So it's one of the benefits of casting, and there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. This isn't a video about that, but there's a lot of different ways that you can do a casting reading to get that sort of trajectory and that feeling of what is the energetic pattern that is influencing what's going on there. So that's one piece of the puzzle where we want to be able to take in card form and sort of mimic some of that ability to see sort of the energy pattern and what it looks like in a way. Now, the other piece of that puzzle is how I read playing cards. So this is, sorry, I should say what all these decks are on the table. This is the Eye of the Ocean playing card deck by Stockholm 17. I love their decks, their playing card decks, and I just haven't put this away since I got it. It's been on my table, so that's what this is. This is the Cosmovisions Oracle by James Eads. Never put this down since I got the very first sort of test copy. This is the Rider-Waite playing card deck. And this is my own Nellie's deck that's forever in production. Anyways, that's the decks that we have on the table. So in playing card reading, in the way that I learned to read playing cards, and the best example of this that I've seen shown, which I believe I had a copy of maybe in the late 90s, is my guess, or in the 90s at some point, is there is a website that I'll put a link to called, well, the website's not called this, but she had a series, oh, look at how messed my fingers are, oh well. She had a series for a witch with poor memory, for the witch with middling memory, and for the witch with, I don't remember the last one, superior memory or something like that, where she kind of walks through a way of reading playing cards, because obviously there's a lot of different ways you can read playing cards. But one of the things that I love is that and one of the things that I teach as well, is that one of the reasons playing cards are so fantastic is you can get these wonderful yes and no readings, yes but no but readings, what I would call them, right? So you're using the black and the white, or the black and the red cards to, first of all, you're not looking at the suit, you're not looking at numbers, you're just looking red, black, black. Starts out good, goes downhill from there, right? And you're really just getting a trajectory based off of that color pattern, right? Looking really good, because these are hearts, but that's going the next step, but looking really good, but there's something at the end that could come in and disrupt that. Now I can add in the suits and say this is really good because it's the red hearts, which are the best of the reds, and it's the okay of the black suits with the clubs. It's not a spade. So there could be, you know, this is a yes, but watch out at the end. Something could come in, especially in terms of interactions with people or situations that might come in and muck it up, right? But I'm getting this pattern, right, that's playing out just through the blacks and the reds, or then we can take that another step when adding in the suits. But it's a really great way to see a sort of a trajectory pattern. So now in playing cards, we don't use reversals because, right, if you take this card and reverse it, it looks the same. Now, aces are different, but we still don't read them. Some decks don't have the two-faced courts, but a lot of decks had two-faced courts. So again, they look the same whichever way you put them. And so I have never utilized the tradition of reversals in playing cards. We don't need them. We have the patterns here. And then we also have, you know, I generally read a 6 card. This card is going to tell me whether to read this in its light or shadow. And this card is also going to impact it. So this influences, again, this isn't a playing card class. But my point is we don't use reversals in playing cards because of the way that playing cards are set up and because it already has other ways built in. Okay, so take the concept of really getting an overall look at the energy of a situation from casting and the wonderful patterning that we can utilize in playing cards because of the strict, you know, 50% red, 50% black, 25% really good, 25% okay good, 25% really bad, 25% okay problematic, right? So because of the way that it's set up, it's great for that. So the next, so I don't use reversals in tarot. And the why of that is because I do think that when you're utilizing how I read, which is the numbers plus the suit and the minors, we have the pattern trajectory, already a large pattern trajectory of the major arcana, and the court cards are telling me how is that energy working. I just don't find it generally to be necessary. And there are other ways to be able to, you should be looking at light and shadow all the time, both of them. But depending on your spread, because I'm mostly using spreads with tarot, if I need a shadow aspect or a do and a don't do, like that's already built into the spread. So I don't really use reversals. Now, many people use reversals in tarot, and even when they do so, they do it in different ways, right? So this one is reversed up, although, you know, let's just grab. So with this one, some people would take, so the Page of Cups is about playing with, for me, your inner power and your inner landscape. Suit of Cups are water, about your emotional level, but when you go step below that, that's where your inner power resides, right? Pages are exploratory, playful. They're just learning and trying to learn new ways of that. When it's in reversed, right, you could read it the opposite, being that you're not learning. Maybe you're really clamped down on just the way it's always been, and you're not having that sort of open energy towards your emotions or your inner landscape. So you're taking the traditional meaning of the card and flipping it upside down and seeing it in its negative. Now, obviously, sometimes that is a positive. So if you have the Devil card, which is about abdication of power, if it's in reverse, you could read that as you taking your power back. Now, again, when I get the Devil card in its upright form, it is about abdication of power, but it's also about taking your power. It's always telling me to take my power back. So I don't personally feel like I need those reversal cues because that should always be part of the card. Regardless, while we are going to talk about reversals, this video is not strictly about reversals. So the other thing is, and I did do this for a while, just trying to play with how, if I use reversals, how would I use it? You can also use it just as an exclamation point. You're still going to read this the way you're going to read it, but there's some emphasis there that gives you a little more indication of pay attention here because this might be an important place. So that's a way that you can, some people also, so there's different ways. If somebody uses reversals, there are also multiple ways in which a person might utilize those reversals. But I don't use reversals in tarot. Again, with tarot, I am primarily spread based, And so my spread is going to hold space for the different things that I need to get out of that. And again, I do think it's inherently built in with the number system. And I also think we should be looking at both of those things simultaneously. Enter the Cosmovision's Oracle, which is an amazing oracle. I have not stopped using this, and I use it a ton. I primarily use it in my past life readings. I always use it in my past life readings, both the charted and the uncharted, because of what we're going to talk about in a second. I also like it for the same reasons in some ancestral readings that I do, especially if I'm doing sort of those patterns that go across generations. And I also have one of my favorite readings to do right now is called a multi-dimensional check-in. And this is where I feel like it all sort of came to a head, where it's not just for an ancestral work or a past life work, but that there's is a place to put this, I think, in a lot of our readings. Make a space for a pattern aspect to our readings, which is kind of what I'm talking about here. But let's, I'm working my way there. So in my past life readings, if it's a charted one, I'm looking at the birth chart, I'm doing a tarot reading, I'm getting a message from the person in their previous lifetime to their current self. And then what I love is that I still want, so I've got a lot of information at that point, a lot of breadcrumbs about who this person was in the past life in terms of the issues that may be taking place and what they may need to work on in this lifetime. So they've already built up sort of this sort of breadcrumb trail of who this was, right? But I like to use the Cosmovisions after I do all that, because I do it with the reversals, and I pull 4 cards: birth, childhood, adulthood, and death. And I very rarely, it happens, and when I does, I pay attention to it. I very rarely get all upright or all reversed, and it's generally a mix of those things. And so it can be really helpful to see sort of the overarching pattern and where things might have gotten disruptive, because we've already learned where there may be of difficulties in that past life through looking at the birth chart and things like that, and the different things that you look at there. And so I've already got an idea that there are disruptions that are coming forward into this current lifetime that we're living. So being able to get an idea over and over again, like, it makes sense. When I pull this and get to see sort of a pattern of that life, I can see where maybe, oh yeah, like they were really born into some chaotic times, or they were born into some times that were, good, started out good, but boy, in childhood, their whole world got flipped upside down. Maybe it stayed crazy, or maybe they sort of found some balance in adulthood, and then life just threw itself on its end at the end, and they just kind of went out in chaos. And we can feel that chaos in the current lifetime, or lots of different patterns, obviously, that can show up that time and time again I find to be really reflective, and makes a little bit more sense of all of the breadcrumbs that we've already found. So I have used this a lot since I have had this, which has been longer than it's been out, because I did get a prototype before it went into Kickstarter or anything. And so I've been using this for a long time and really love it, again, for that reason. Now, the same thing with ancestor readings. Now, I have a couple of ancestor readings, and I do a lot of ancestor readings for clients. But one I've been doing for myself, because I always do it for myself for a while before I put them up, I kind of pulled that in. So I have sort of an ancestor message, but then where we need to be doing the work, because I don't believe working with ancestors is one way, right? Where they're just sending guidances and messages to us. That's one aspect, which is fantastic, and it's sort of the guardian aspect for me. But the other thing is that we're supposed to be acknowledging and recognizing that there is work that we need to do. There are patterns that are playing out across generations that we might need to be mindful of in our own life, so that we can disrupt some of those patterns, or potentially be continue to reinforce a good pattern that we want to keep moving forward in our generational line. And so the same thing, generally I'll do 3 in this case, but I'm, of course, now look, I never get that, hardly ever, where it's the same. Um, but in this case, I would be looking and saying, okay, we've got some stability and making sort of a community energy that's stable here, that's creating this new mapping and pathway forward for the family, right? For my generational things, and that's leading to a really solid space here. So I would take this and say, I need to continue to manifest that pattern. That's a good pattern that I need to solidify and continue to do the work, not just for myself, but for my ancestors in the past and for my heritage moving forward, my legacy moving forward. I need to continue to uphold that pattern. But, it may not turn out that way, right? It may be a pattern and now I'm going to get all 3. It's so funny. As soon as I say I don't generally get one of, I do get them, but most often it's a combination of both. But here might be a negative pattern. Again, I'm not reading the cards here because sometimes reversals aren't always negative. But when I'm just looking at the reverses versus the uprights, I'm seeing, okay, a lot of disruptive generational energy that I need to do the work on, both for myself and for my past ancestors, because I don't believe energy healing goes just one direction in terms of time, but that's a whole nother conversation. But I need to do the work for myself, for my ancestors in the past, and for my legacy moving forward, say through my daughter and through what I put out into the world, which is also a legacy, right? So I need to sit and do some works, and that sort of negative pattern is what I need to focus on for the coming few months or whatever. So it's really helpful in ancestor readings when you're looking at generation, because I think that we can all acknowledge that we see patterns play out across our single lifetime. We can all acknowledge that we definitely can see patterns that play out across generations. And if, like me, you believe in past lives, it's pretty obvious, given those 2 things, that there are patterns that play out across lifetimes, right? So we understand and we look for patterns. That's what people who are cartomancers and diviners, that's what we do. We're looking for patterns, and so that we can use those patterns to make better decisions, right? So then I also have found with this, again, this multidimensional check-in reading that I have done a ton of. Thank you to people who have loved that reading. I have found that adding in, so in that it's doing a check-in, but in the very bottom, for the first dimension in the underworld, I've added a similar thing to what we've been talking about, where I use the Cosmovisions Oracle, and I'm pulling 3 cards to look at an overarching pattern this is not a short-term pattern. This might be a lifelong pattern. This might be a generational pattern. Or if the person believes in past lives, this might be a multi-life pattern. And it can certainly be a combination of those 3 things, right? In the way that I see past lives intersecting with our generational lives, family lives, as well as those things, again, replaying out in our current life. There's an overlap of those things, right? But to be able to, before we get to the middle world where we're at and we're doing our business, to be aware that there might be a bigger pattern that is not directly below the surface, it's down there, but there's a larger pattern that may be is impacting us and what's going on in the short term of what's happening right here and now. And I have found this to be so helpful, right? To see, look, all of these 3 things, whatever that might look like, let's say the veil is reversed or whatever's going down in this bigger pattern may be a good thing, maybe a pattern that needs to be broken, but it's a big pattern that we should at least be aware has an impact on what's going on here and now. And so I do feel like a lot of times we're looking in the middle world, right? We may be looking beneath the surface in a reading. We may be going into the upper world and getting guidances and getting messages. But I feel like, at least for myself, I don't think we always go down deep enough to see these bigger patterns, which could be impacting these other things and might be also understanding why we're getting that particular guidance as well. So I've just found that using a deck, it doesn't have to be any of these decks, but using a deck to be able to just first of all just look at the pattern. So whatever, pulling a deck that and you can do this with tarot. Again, this is made for this, made for liminal space, made for overarching big patterns. So for me, it's Cosmovisions all the way. But you don't have to have that, right? You can use any deck and say, okay, first thing you're going to want to do though is just look at the reversals for that pattern, right? And just be like, okay, so I've got an upright, reverse, and an upright. So when I first look at that, kind of like with the playing cards, right? I'm saying, okay, we have that sort of things are going along, but there's a bigger pattern of things like messing things up in the middle, things sort of disrupting the energy or the flow of what's happening, and then needing to get back on track. So then, one of the things is try to figure out, okay, where are we at? And we often know that, say, yeah, I'm in a place where right now everything is disruptive. I know the bigger pattern is going to be that this is going to smooth out, but how, given the more information about what's in the cards, continuing to read it, how can I get myself to that point, right? I need to make choices and decisions here and now to help me to get into a part of the pattern that is better there. How can I disrupt this disruption, so to speak? And so, if you're just doing a regular playing card, if you're just doing a regular reading for yourself, you might want to just try that out. Grab a deck that you don't mind being in reverses and pull 3 cards, 3 or 4, however you want to do that, but just pull a couple cards. They need to be at least 3 to see a pattern. I like the 4 for the linear sort of beginning, very beginning, lower middle, upper middle age, and then sort of the culmination. So 4 is a nice pattern. I use that the most, but 3 and 4 is what I generally use. And just pull that for what is a bigger pattern across my lifetime or across my family generation, if you're someone who works with the ancestors a lot, or if you really work with past lives, across multiple lifetimes for myself, that's influencing how I'm reacting to this situation. And I think you'll find that can be really helpful information to add to what you're already looking at. And I just brought this out because we do have some decks where this can be really interesting. And I'm just using this as an example because this is a mashup deck, right? So I have playing cards and I have the tarot aspect, and I have a fortune telling style deck. I also have the reds and the blacks, and then when it's finished, these will be more of a sepia brown, but I have the color patterns as well. And so if I use this in reversals, then I've got some really cool ways of playing with this, right? Let's just do this so that we can kind of see how that might be. I can look at the color. I've got big energy especially once it's turned to sepia, it's going to be really obvious. And then I have 2 blacks. So I can look at that and get my information there. I also can say in this case, I'm really focusing more on the playing card definition of the card. And even because most of the fortune telling symbols are closely based to, they cross over both. They're the in between the two, but they are strongly influenced by the playing card definition as well. So that's going to be more in forefront, where if it's like this, now we have the tarot, which is always there, but it's the least component of this deck for me as how I read it. But I'm going to pay more attention to the 8 of Swords than I am the 8 of Spades, because of utilizing that reversal and seeing the pattern. So if you have a deck that's like that, that's similar to that, that can be an interesting way to play. Or even this one where you again can use the reversals right here on the top of the cards themselves. and again, you're just using reversals because it's on there. So this is kind of a mishmash of playing cards and tarot. So anyways, I hope that that has been of some interest to you. Again, it's something that is built into the way that I read playing cards, and so that's been a long practice with that. And then with, it makes sense when you're looking at ancestor work or past life work, it makes sense to see that trajectory. But with that multidimensional reading, and again, being able to do quite a lot of them in a relatively short amount of time, you can really start to see how that flows, right? And how that works in a reading, in a regular reading, right? That's not on those particular, it's not an ancestor reading, it's not a past life reading, but it's a regular check-in reading, but we're checking in with that bigger pattern that could be playing out. I've just found it to be extremely helpful to myself and to my clients. And I can certainly see myself adding that into more almost as a position. Done a tarot reading, we've kind of looked over a situation. Let's just take a peek real quick. I don't have to spend a ton of time on it, but let's take a peek at the pattern that's playing out, and whether or not there's something bigger at work that might be playing out that is impacting the situation. Okay, I hope it was of interest. I hope it was helpful. I hope you give it a try, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening.